From A&E, this is Biography.
October 26, 1967, at the height of the Vietnam War, a young U.S. Navy pilot named John Mccain was on a bombing run over Hanoi when his plane was hit by an enemy missile.
His parents called me and they said, "Johnny's been shot down." And his mother said, "I think we've lost him."
But Mccain survived. Dragged from a lake, he would spend the next 5.5 years in a Vietnamese prison camp, where he was brutally tortured.
Frankly, I expected him to die, but John survived on will alone.
Mccain was hailed as a hero on his return and eventually elected to the U.S. Senate, where this tough survivor is still waging wars.
McCain is the Maverick of the Senate. He's got a complete willingness, bordering on insanity, to say what he thinks.
We don't view this solution as perfect.
I mean, if he disagrees with you on an issue, you're going to know about him.
I think being a war hero has given him the inward strength to do things that the ordinary politician wouldn't do.
John Sidney McCain III, born August 29, 1936, grew up in a family where serving one's country was a way of life. His father and grandfather, John Jr. and Sr., were both four-star admirals in the U.S. Navy. So everyone just assumed that young John, the third in line, would carry on his family's military tradition. John had been born in the Panama Canal Zone, but like a lot of military brats, he never really had a hometown. He and his family moved from one naval base to the next, living everywhere from Hawaii to Connecticut.
When you grow up in a family like ours, you feel if you're not serving in some way, that you're being kind of selfish. Part of our service was to not complain when we had to move from place to place.
John, who grew up surrounded by men in uniform, was a tough, self-reliant little boy. And because he moved around so often, he quickly learned how to adapt to new places.
I think the reason John was such a talkative, chatty, gregarious fellow is because we were always having to go into schools where all the cliques had formed, and you either had to be a big star athlete or you had to have a pretty good rap.
John's rap made him popular in grade school, but by the time he entered Episcopal High School, a boarding school for boys in Alexandria, Virginia, he began to rebel against authority. The year was 1950, and John became the school's own James Dean, a tough guy, ringleader of a band of friends who smoked, drank, and broke curfew to cruise for girls. But no matter how rebellious he was in high school, John's family background ensured his acceptance at the U.S. Naval Academy, where he was enrolled in 1954. Since it was founded in 1845, Annapolis had trained generations of young men to be leaders. Men like John's grandfather, class of 1906, and his father, class of 31. As a young plebe, John knew he would have a hard time just living up to his family name.
I think John felt the burden of a father and a grandfather in the Navy. At that time, his father was only a captain, but his grandfather had 4 stars, and so John kind of resented everybody saying, "Well, you know, I knew your grandfather. Are you going to measure up to your grandfather?" This sort of thing.
Here we go! Ready? Hit it! Hold on!
To measure up at Annapolis is not easy. Discipline is the order of the day, and young plebes are expected to stay in top physical shape while also meeting high academic standards. And Mccain, ever the rebel, found it hard to conform.
I got in trouble for everything from wearing boots when you're supposed to wear shoes to not having my bed made. There were very few regulations in a very large rule book that I didn't at one time or another break.